Watch This Week in Missouri Politics, Sunday mornings at 11 on ABC 30.
We're now joined by the Chief of Staff to the Mayor of St. Louis, Francis Slay, Jeff Rainford, who will now be leaving the office here shortly.
Scott, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. First of all, I think a lot of folks have wondered, what is the thing, of all the stuff you've been involved in, what are you most proud of?
You know, I tell people that I'm actually proud of the big things we've done. The city's attracted $9 billion with a B in new investments since Mayor Slay came into office. And, you know, buildings that were vacant for a very long time, like the old city hospital, like the Peabody Opera House, like the arcade building, and many, many others, have new life and have brought new energy and new activity to the city. And, you know, people who haven't been in the city in a long time come back and say, oh my gosh, it's so much different and so much better. But I'm also proud of the things that haven't gotten a lot of attention, like when the Mayor Slay took office, lead paint poisoning in children was at an epidemic proportion. And lead paint poisoning, you know, hurts IQ, leads to more violence, and he reduced it from almost 1 in 5 kids down to virtually nothing. So very proud of the big things, but also the things that didn't get a lot of attention.
When is the last day?
So I'm going to work through February the 6th, and you know, it's still crazy right now, still a lot going on right now, so it still seems a little bit unreal to me. And you know, after 14 years, actually I've thought a lot about you know, how I'll feel the last day I walk out of City Hall as Chief of Staff, and I'm pretty sure that I'll shed a tear, because while it has been a maddening job and a frustrating job, it's also been thrilling and really fulfilling, and I have to say thank you to Mayor Slay and the people of St. Louis for giving me the chance.
What's the one thing you would like to have another shot at?
Well, I don't know if we could get another shot at it, but the biggest disappointment is I really thought around 2006, 2007, the city was at a tipping point, was really ready to take off. You know, the momentum was there, and then the Great Recession hit, and it really pounded us. It really hurt the city. We were able to play defense, and we were able to hold it together, but, you know, things really still haven't gotten back to where they were, and they certainly, we certainly don't have the momentum that we had then. You know, so that's my biggest frustration or biggest regret is I really thought we were there, and then that happened, and you know, since then, like I said, there's been a lot of defense.
Tell us about the conversation with the mayor. You're the only Chief of Staff he's ever had, correct?
Yeah, Mayor Slay and I go back to 1995. Yeah. I ran his first campaign for citywide office for President of the Board of Aldermen. I ran his campaign in 2001, and then again in 2009. I've been with him every step of the way. I'll still advise Mayor Slay. I think his attitude was sort of like mine. How the heck did you last this long? I mean, nobody's ever done this job for 14 years. It is a burnout job, both emotionally and physically, and I think his thinking was, you know what, I'm glad that I had you as long as I had you.
Is it hard to let go, though? Do you think there'll be when there's a problem that comes up in the city, will it be hard for you not to be the one in the middle?
That'll be the biggest thing, both a frustration and a habit, because there are lots of things as Chief of Staff that when they go right or go wrong, you can pick up the phone and fix right away. And now I'll be, you know, I'll have to call somebody who'll call somebody, and it will, my first instinct is always going to be, hey, you know, something goes wrong at the airport, to call Rhonda up and say, hey, Rhonda, you got to do this, and then Rhonda's going to remind me, hey, you're not my boss anymore. So it will take some getting used to.
Tell us about the new Chief of Staff.
So the new Chief of Staff is Mary Ellen Ponder, who, as it turns out, is the first female to be the Chief of Staff of a mayor in the city of St. Louis in its long 250-year history. She's really, really bright, really smart. She'll have a completely different style than I do. I think my style is a little bit more straightforward and a little bit in your face.
Throat punch was used this week
by Mr. Callum.
I
don't know that I've ever thrown a throat punch, but I can't say that metaphorically it's wrong. You know, her style, she's very, very smart. She'll have a different style. I think she'll be able to build coalitions probably better. She'll be able to talk people into things better. And I think at the end of the day, she's going to be very, very effective.
Can you tell us a little bit about the team she's assembling around her?
Yeah, the new, and I think it's going to be strong, the new operations director, that'll be the person in charge of potholes and snow removal and parks and streets and things, is going to be Todd Walterman, who has been battle tested as the mayor's streets director, and he's going to do a terrific job. He is a great leader and a really smart guy and an innovator. I think that's going to be, you know, him along with the city councilor, Winston Calvert. Winston is a young lawyer, you know, came from the private sector, is a really sharp guy. And then Patrick Brown, who is going to be the new deputy chief of staff, is very strong too. So I think the three of them are going to be able to do this without skipping a beat. And then beyond that, what the mayor and I have talked about is that I'm going to continue to work with him and work with them on bigger issues like the stadium, like Ferguson, like crime and things like that. But on the day-to-day stuff, the tactical stuff and things like that, the city will be in good hands.
Speaking of the future now, what do you do on February 7th?
So it's sort of funny. I'm going to start Rainford and Associates. It'll be a political, strategic communications, public policy firm. It's really what I did, before I took the chief of staff job. In 2001, I left Angelitas Rainford and Associates to run the mayor's campaign. Then the mayor said, "Hey, just get me started." So I thought I'd go in for 2 years, and then it lasted 14 years. So I'm really getting back to what I did before, just with a 14-year hiatus.
Just a 14-year break, sure.
Exactly. Hopefully people will remember who I am.
I don't think they've forgotten. Let's talk about some of the issues in the city, though. We were scheduled to have the incoming chief of staff with us now, but she's at a press conference because of some crime issues. Tell our readers and our viewers in Jeff City that are state policymakers, what are some things the state could do to help deal with issues so these aren't as prevalent in St. Louis?
So crime right now is our #1 issue. It's not always our #1 issue, but there's no doubt it is right now. And things have gone haywire since the shooting in Ferguson. And there's probably a couple reasons for that. Our officers have been taken off their regular jobs and their beats and things to go on to manage all of the protests that are going on. And in some manner, the criminals seem to be more emboldened. I mean, for 7 straight years, crime went down. It was down overall by more than 50%. But since August, things, like I said, have gone haywire. And so I think there's a couple of things. Number one is we got to get our officers back to fighting crime, get back to what they like to do, which is policing the city and enforcing the law, and get arrests back up and get crime back down. Number two is the mayor's proposed 160 new police officers. And this is not anything that Jeff City can do. It's something that we have to do here. But ultimately, I do think when you get to Jeff City, you really got to be talking about what can we do as a state to improve policing. Now, we've had ideas like a COPS program where, you have state money in it and local matching money. But whatever Jefferson City does on the policing side, I think the first thing is do no harm. Sure. Let's not do anything that are going to tie police officers' hands or make their jobs any more difficult unnecessarily than they do. Beyond that, we need to address racial disparities. A lot of the crime comes out of our neighborhoods that we have concentrated poverty, and we have kids going to bad schools. We need more charter schools, and the mayor wants charter school authority so he can charter schools. We have real...
and that's worked other places, right?
It's working it's worked in other places, worked in Indianapolis, and we have a charter school process. It's unwieldy, but we have a charter school process where we go out and find a sponsor. We started more than 15 charter schools, and all of them to various degrees are successful. So the mayor has a track record. The problem we have is that it is so unwieldy that it really makes it difficult and takes up more time than it needs to for us to start new charter schools.
There's one thing the mayor articulated that I heard one time. In Jefferson City, there's the issue of guns. And in Jefferson City, you only hear one side of that debate, which is more. The mayor's made some arguments that were pretty nuanced, and he's listened to in Jeff City by the party in power. Can you articulate for our viewers some of the things you've seen the mayor do, or maybe your thoughts on the issue of guns and how they are different maybe in St. Louis than they are Sedalia?
The problem and we get that, listen, I camp a lot in the Ozarks. I float the great rivers in the Mark Twain National Forest. I understand, when I'm driving around South Central Missouri and Southern Missouri, I see the difference between how people live their lives there and how they live them in the city of St. Louis, where out in the rural areas, your nearest neighbor, is a long way away, whereas in the city of St. Louis, we are densely packed in. The problem for the city is we have no problem with law-abiding citizens having guns and using them however they see fit. Our problem in the city is that it's way too easy for criminals and people who are even mentally ill to get guns. And then number two is there's not enough of a consequence when criminals use guns. you know, the mayor's talking today about a study done by the University of Missouri St. Louis in which there was, what they found is that 63% of the criminals who used a gun, who were convicted or pled guilty, 63% got probation and didn't do any time. I mean, I get that for marijuana possession and things like that, but if you're using a gun, there ought to be a consequence. And so the mayor's for a gun court, and he's for higher bonds for people who are using a gun in the commission of a felony. The other issue with state laws is, again, we're fine with hunters and all that, but there's a law now that says that even if you're a convicted criminal, even if you're not supposed to have a gun, if you have a gun in your car, you don't have to have a permit for it. You can have it out in the open, and if police arrest you for that, there's nothing they can do about it. We have, of the arrests made in the city of St. Louis for illegal possession of guns, 40% of them get thrown out based on that technicality that they're like, oh, that's not my gun in the car. And because the law is so loose, the circuit attorney in 40% of the time has to dismiss the charges or not charge in the first place, and therefore people who are potentially violent or who already have a history of violence get to go free.
Another issue the mayor's been to Jeff City before on is tax credits. Is that something that you'll see him in the Capitol again advocating for? And maybe explain to some of our viewers in other parts of the state how important those tax credits are to St. Louis.
The historic tax credit is the most important tax credit in the state of Missouri for the city of St. Louis. We are #1 in the country. The city of St. Louis is #1 in the country for historic rehabs. That means buildings that were vacant or derelict or abandoned that are historic have been rehabilitated, and primarily because of the state historic tax credit. I think we're over $1 billion now in construction of historic buildings that is related to the historic tax credit. It's #1 in the country. Without it, I don't know where our city would be. Of all the things, there's lots of things the mayor has done, lots of things that have happened, but all the tools, that's the single most important tool.
Just quickly on the issue of equality, is there something that on your mind that the state could do to assist in addressing some of the issues of equality that have been raised here by protesters and other government leaders?
So I think that the challenge for the state of Missouri is that people in sort of the wealthier suburbs and the rural areas have a very different view of what happened in Ferguson and what happened in our neighborhood, in Shaw neighborhood, and in North St. Louis. They have a very different view of it. And I think at the end of the day, what we have to do is Republicans and Democrats and conservatives and liberals got to figure out what can we agree on. Because coming out of this session with nothing is not going to help. So I think there's probably going to be agreement about these kangaroo courts that exist in St. Louis County and some of these municipalities and police departments that aren't big enough to have the kind of sophistication to handle the kind of difficult issues you have in an urban setting. You know, beyond that, I don't know that you're going to be able to get very far on that side of it, but I hope we can all agree that every child, including every low-income African-American kid in North City and North County, should have access to a good education, should be able to, even if they didn't get a good education, if they want to work and get a job and things like that. So I would hope that we could at least agree on racial disparities.
And last question. 3 years from now, will the Rams play in St. Louis?
So I think that what's going to happen in St. Louis is that we're going to remain an NFL city, but I can't really tell you which franchise. I don't know. I'm not being coy.
So there'll be an NFL team, it just might not be the Rams.
It could be the Rams with the current owner.
Would you be a part of that process?
Well, I'll be part of the process of keeping St. Louis an NFL city, absolutely.
I think that bodes well for the prospects. Mr. Rainford, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. And we'll be right back with our This Week in Missouri Politics Opinion Maker panel.